My son told me to stay out of his business. 2 weeks later, his business was mine. My son told me to stay out of his business. I should have listened to his warning, because when I finally stopped staying out, everything he'd built came crashing down, and I became the architect of his destruction. The grand opening of Derek's auto repair shop was supposed to be a celebration of everything we'd built together. The ribbon cutting was scheduled for 10 in the morning on a Saturday. The whole town showed up. There were journalists, potential clients, investors, family friends, everyone Derek wanted to impress. I'd helped him prepare for months. I'd given him advice about suppliers, about customer service, about the kind of business model that actually survives. I'd taught him everything I knew from 30 years in the business. That morning, I wore my best shirt. I was so incredibly proud of my son. When Derek cut that ribbon with a huge smile and the crowd applauded, I walked over to him. I put my hand on his shoulder and said, "I'm so proud of you, son. This is going to be great. Everything we planned for." That's when his face changed completely. His smile disappeared. His jaw tightened. He stepped back from me, and in front of everyone, every customer, every employee, every investor, he said it with ice in his voice, "Stay out of my business, Dad. You had your time. This is mine now. I don't need your help anymore." The words hit like a physical blow. His voice was cold. Colder than I'd ever heard it. His eyes were harder than I'd ever seen them. I stood there with my hand still reaching out, frozen in place, while the crowd went deathly silent. Someone laughed nervously, but nobody else made a sound. Derek turned away from me and started shaking hands with investors. I dropped my hand slowly and forced a smile, but inside, something fundamental broke. My own son had just publicly humiliated me in front of this entire town. He'd rejected me. He'd told me I was irrelevant. And I was still standing there smiling like it didn't devastate me. But to understand how we'd gotten here, I need to take you back 2 weeks. Derek had come to my house desperate. His previous business venture, a car detailing company, had failed spectacularly. He'd made poor decisions, overspent on equipment, and undersold his services. He'd lost everything. He was broken. He came to my door at midnight, crying, asking if there was any way I could help him start over. He said he had a new idea. A better idea. An auto repair shop. He said he'd learned from his mistakes. He said he needed one more chance. What father wouldn't help his son get a second chance? I didn't hesitate. I went to the bank the next day and mortgaged my workshop. My entire life's work. 30 years of equity. The bank approved the loan because my credit was solid. My history was solid. I'd built something real. Then I co-signed the loan personally. I put my name on the line. I even transferred ownership of some of my old equipment to Derek, specialized diagnostic tools, lift equipment, tool sets that I'd spent years acquiring. Equipment worth tens of thousands of dollars. When Derek asked me for these things, I gave them without question. He was my son. This was his chance. Within days, the word spread through town. My old client started visiting Derek's new shop instead of mine. At first, I didn't mind, I wanted him to succeed. But then I started hearing things. People told me Derek had said he inherited the shop from me. He told investors that I'd retired and handed him the keys. He told people I was the old generation and he represented innovation and modern thinking. I wasn't just being replaced, I was being erased. One afternoon, a longtime client named James pulled me aside. "I went to Derek's shop yesterday," he said carefully. "He told me you retired. He said you were tired of the business and wanted to let him take over completely. He made it sound like you were done. Is that what happened?" My stomach dropped. No, that wasn't what happened at all. I'd mortgaged everything to help him. I'd signed for his loan. But Derek was rewriting the story. When I confronted Derek about it that evening, asking when he'd repay me and when we'd formalize the equipment transfer, he sneered at me. "You invested because you wanted to, not because I asked you to," he said coldly, dismissing me. "You're always trying to claim credit for my success. It's pathetic, Dad. It's embarrassing. You're trying to live through me because your own life is over." That first knife twist nearly destroyed me. I sat in my workshop that night with the lights off, just thinking about what he'd said. Was I trying to live through him? Was I being pathetic? Or was something else going on here? I started noticing inconsistencies. Suppliers started calling me asking about unpaid invoices from Derek's location. They'd say things like, "Your son owes us $4,000 for parts. When's he going to pay?" I'd tell them I wasn't involved, but they'd keep calling. Customers started coming back to my shop complaining that Derek's work was sloppy. One guy said Derek had misdiagnosed an electrical problem and charged him $1,000 for unnecessary repairs. Another woman said Derek had overcharged her for an oil change and been rude when she questioned the bill. The shop I'd helped him build was developing a reputation for being dishonest. One night, I decided to drive over to Derek's shop unannounced. It was about 9 p.m. The shop was supposed to be closed, but lights were still on in the back office. I parked across the street and watched through the windows. That's when I witnessed something that made my blood run cold. Derek's business partner, Eli, a guy Derek had hired without consulting me, was stuffing cash into a duffel bag from the register. Actual wads of cash. Hundreds of dollars. Then he locked the cash drawer and pulled out a ledger, writing down fake numbers. When I walked in and confronted him about it, demanding to know what he was doing, Eli just grinned at me. "Derek said it's none of your concern, old man," Eli said mockingly, not even trying to hide what he'd been doing. "You're not even supposed to be here. You're not part of this business anymore." Derek made that very clear. My hands were shaking. I realized in that moment that Derek hadn't just pushed me away emotionally. He'd completely cut me out. And more than that, something fundamentally crooked was happening at that shop. If you're enjoying this story so far, please like and subscribe. The next scenes will absolutely shock you. The next morning, I went to the bank and requested copies of all the business loan forms. I sat down with the loan officer, my heart pounding. That's when the truth hit me like a sledgehammer. My name wasn't on any of the official loan documents. According to the paperwork, I'd been bought out of the business. But I'd never agreed to any buyout. When I asked to see the buyout documents, they showed my signature, but I'd never signed them. Derek had forged my signature. My own son had committed federal fraud using my name without my consent. I could feel the color draining from my face. The loan officer looked uncomfortable. "Mr. James," he said quietly, "this is a serious matter. You should contact an attorney." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my workshop in the dark, completely alone, trembling with rage and grief. My hands were literally shaking. My chest felt tight. I'd sacrificed everything for this boy, my equity, my equipment, my reputation. And he'd repaid me with fraud. I visited my late wife's grave that morning. I hadn't been there in months. I'd been too busy helping Derek, too focused on his success. I sat down on the grass in front of her headstone and whispered, "I gave him everything we built together. Everything. And he's destroying it. He's stealing from me. He's committing crimes using my name." Her voice came back to me, something she used to say all the time, "Never let pride blind you to deceit." She was right. My pride in Derek had completely blinded me to what was actually happening. He wasn't a good man trying to get his second chance. He was a con artist. And he was my son. That moment, sitting in front of her grave, I made a decision. I was going to stop being blind. I was going to dig deeper. And this time, I was going to do it quietly and methodically. Carl, an old mechanic who'd worked with me for 15 years and was still loyal to my shop, came to find me one afternoon. He pulled me into the back office and closed the door. He was nervous, I could see it in his face. "I need to tell you something," he said quietly. "And this stays between us." He explained that he'd worked a few jobs at Derek's shop for extra cash. He'd seen things. Derek and Eli were taking cash-only jobs from customers paying under the table, and none of it was being recorded in the books. The money was being diverted to a side company. And that side company? It was registered using my tax identification number without my knowledge or consent. My son wasn't just defrauding me personally. He was laundering money through my identity. That's when I understood the full scope of his betrayal. This wasn't just about family conflict or pride. This was organized fraud. This was federal crime. I drove to Derek's shop unannounced that afternoon. The moment I walked in, Derek panicked. His face went absolutely pale. His hands started shaking. He immediately started hiding paperwork in drawers, moving files around, trying to conceal evidence. I walked past him toward the back lot. That's when I saw it, a truck with my old workshop's logo painted over with Derek's name. The equipment on that truck, the tools, everything, it was mine. I'd given it to Derek, but he was using it illegally. "Didn't think I'd notice that truck, did you?" I said quietly. Derek came up behind me, his voice cold and dismissive. "You're living in the past, Dad. Move on. Stop trying to relive your glory days through me." Those words confirmed what I'd been afraid of. The boy I'd raised, the kid I'd taught to value honesty and hard work, had become someone I didn't recognize. I gave him one final chance. I went to his office, closed the door, and said it clearly and calmly: "Either you make this right, reimburse me for the equipment, come clean to the bank about the forged documents, shut down the side operation, and confess everything, or I walk into the bank and then I walk into the police station. You have 48 hours to decide." Derek actually laughed in my face. Not a nervous laugh. A genuine, mocking laugh. "You wouldn't destroy your own son," he said, shaking his head like I was ridiculous. "You're bluffing. You're all talk, old man. Family loyalty means something." That's when I realized something crucial. Derek had no idea who his father really was. He thought family loyalty would protect him from consequences. He thought I'd choose him over the truth. He was catastrophically wrong. I contacted my old lawyer, Frank, and my accountant, Marcus. We met in Frank's office, and I laid everything out. Every detail. Every crime. Every piece of evidence. Frank brought in a document expert who traced the forged signatures and confirmed that Derek had deliberately falsified my name on multiple documents. Marcus traced the financial records with forensic accounting precision. He uncovered a web of fake invoices, borrowed money that was never repaid, suppliers Derek owed tens of thousands of dollars to, and offshore accounts where money was being diverted. The business was teetering on the edge of collapse. It was only standing because Derek had built it on a foundation of lies and fraud. "If anyone actually audited this place," Marcus said quietly, looking over his glasses at me, "it would implode in a matter of days. This isn't sustainable. He's robbing Peter to pay Paul, and Peter is running out of money." I smiled grimly. A cold, dark smile. It was time to turn the wrench. I started visiting Derek's shop again, but this time with a completely different purpose. I'd bring coffee in the mornings. I'd offer helpful tips about running the business. Derek, thinking I was finally accepting his success and backing off, let his guard down around me. He started treating me like I was harmless. Like I was just an old man reminiscing about the past. While he and Eli were distracted with customers, I discreetly took photographs of documents, register receipts, vehicle identification numbers, and financial records. I knew every corner of that business because I'd taught Derek how to build one. I knew every trick because I'd pioneered most of them, legitimately. Now I was using that knowledge against him. Rumors started spreading that Derek and Eli were fighting about money. One afternoon, I overheard them shouting at each other when I visited. "I'm not going down for this mess." Eli was yelling. "If the feds come knocking, I'm giving them everything." That's when I made my move. I contacted Eli privately and made him an offer: help me prove the fraud. Provide documentation. Testify if needed. You'll walk free. I have no interest in destroying you. But Derek? He needs to face this. Eli hesitated, loyalty battled with self-preservation. But survival instinct won out. Self-preservation won out. Eli agreed to cooperate. I had Frank prepare detailed financial records showing every fraudulent transaction, every forged document, every diverted payment, every offshore account. Everything meticulously organized. Then, anonymously, I had these records emailed to Derek's investors and the bank manager. I used a burner phone. I covered my tracks. Within 12 hours, the emails had been opened and read. Within 24 hours, panic was spreading through Derek's operation like wildfire. The bank manager called an emergency meeting with Derek. The investors started demanding explanations. Questions came pouring in. The walls were beginning to close in on my son's empire of lies. At the bank meeting, Derek sat down at the table expecting a routine discussion. Then I walked through the door. His face drained of color completely. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. He actually stood up and tried to leave, but security blocked the door. The bank manager turned to Derek and said, "Your co-investor, your father, has initiated a comprehensive review of all transactions dating back to the shop's opening. We have serious concerns." Derek exploded. He stood up, pointing at me, screaming that I was sabotaging him, that I was jealous of his success, that I was a bitter old man trying to destroy my own son out of spite. I sat calmly in my chair and said quietly, "You told me to stay out of your business. Now I'm all in." My voice was calm. But everyone in that room could feel the power behind those words. The absolute certainty. The finality. Within 48 hours, the bank froze Derek's accounts pending a full investigation. Suppliers started pulling out. They'd been contacted by investigators about the fraudulent invoices. Eli, facing federal charges, made a full confession to avoid prison time. He detailed every scheme: how Derek had forged documents, diverted funds into offshore accounts, stolen money from his own father, created fake companies, staged illegal cash transactions, and built his entire empire on quicksand. The police were contacted. Detectives started investigating. The walls weren't just closing in anymore, they were crushing Derek's world with the weight of his own choices. Derek showed up at my house one evening, desperate and frantic. His eyes were wild. His hands were shaking. He tried begging, tried threatening, tried emotional manipulation, everything. "Please, Dad," he said, his voice breaking. "I'm your son. Family comes first. Family loyalty comes first. Please make this go away. Make this stop." I looked at him, this man who'd called me pathetic, who'd erased me from his story, who'd forged my signature and stolen my identity. And I said something that hung in the air between us: "You made your choices, Derek. You called this your business. You told me to stay out. Now deal with it." He left my house screaming that he'd never forgive me. I knew in that moment I'd never see my son the same way again. 3 days later, Derek's shop caught fire. An electrical fire, the initial report said. But something felt deeply wrong about it. The insurance company investigated and found traces of gasoline near Derek's office. Arson. Deliberate arson. Someone had intentionally set the fire to destroy evidence and claim insurance money to pay off mounting debts. Investigators found inconsistencies in Derek's financial accounts. He'd taken out a massive insurance policy just weeks before the fire. 1 week before. When Frank showed the insurance report to the bank, the pieces all fell into place. Derek had tried to commit insurance fraud on top of everything else. The arrest happened on a Tuesday afternoon. Police cars pulled up to Derek's shop in front of customers and employees. Officers handcuffed him and led him away while everyone watched. He was shouting my name, begging me to help him. But I wasn't there. I was in my workshop, working on an engine, hands steady, heart heavy. That evening, I watched the news report. Local business owner arrested for fraud, forgery, insurance fraud, and money laundering. There was Derek's mugshot on the screen. There was his name in bold letters. And there was the end of an era I'd tried so hard to create. The investigation concluded that Derek's entire shop had been funded through fraudulent use of my credit, my property, and my identity. Legally, everything reverted to me as the original guarantor and collateral owner. The business that Derek had told me to stay out of now belonged to me again. But it was ashes. The building was damaged from the fire. The equipment was destroyed. The business was worthless. But somehow, that felt appropriate. He'd built it on nothing, and it had become nothing. I decided to rebuild. Not as Derek's Auto Repair. I started over with a new name, Second Chance Auto. I got loans. I rebuilt the lot from scratch. I hired some of Derek's ex-employees, good, honest people who'd been caught in his schemes and wanted a fresh start. I worked every single day with my hands, rebuilding what had been destroyed. My old clients came back because they remembered who I was. They were loyal. Within months, Second Chance Auto was thriving in ways Derek's shop never could have. Derek was sentenced to 18 months probation and ordered to make restitution. I didn't attend his sentencing hearing. Instead, I was in my workshop, grease-stained hands steady, the old radio humming the same tune Derek and I used to sing together when he was a kid. A quiet kind of heartbreak. This was the price of raising a son who turned out to be someone I didn't raise him to be. Months passed. Then one afternoon, Derek walked into Second Chance Auto looking thin and hollow. He had that look of someone broken and trying to put themselves back together. "Dad," he said quietly. "Can we talk?" We sat in my office, and he told me everything, how empty he'd felt trying to be someone he wasn't, how the fraud had started small and spiraled, how he'd lied to himself as much as he'd lied to me. Then he said it, "Dad. I lost everything." I looked at him and replied softly, "No, Derek. You threw it away." A week later, Derek asked if he could work for me. "At Second Chance Auto," he said. "Any position. I just need a fresh start." I told him, "You can sweep floors. Minimum wage. No favors. You work like everyone else. No special treatment because you're my son." He accepted. For the first time in years, Derek was honest about who he was and what he needed. It wasn't cruelty that I was offering. It was redemption, but earned. Months went by. Customers started noticing the young man who swept floors with quiet diligence. He worked without complaining. He did extra tasks without being asked. He was learning what honest work meant. One evening, as we were closing the shop, Derek thanked me. "I finally understand what you were trying to teach me," he said. I nodded and said, "That's right. Pride won't build an engine, Derek. Work will. Honesty will. Character will." I locked up the shop at closing time, watching Derek finish sweeping the lot. I turned the "closed" sign in the window and looked up at the logo, Second Chance Auto. A quiet smile crossed my face. I whispered to myself, "Guess I finally stayed in my business." Stayed long enough to save it. Stayed long enough to save him too.